Dating Bites, written by Short Story Queen. Chapter 1. Midnight Tapas and Tinder Fires. Lucian Moreau preferred his blood warmed to human body temperature, precisely 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and served in a crystal wine glass he'd smuggled out of a crumbling chateau during the siege of Toulon. He was, if nothing else, a man of particular rituals. So naturally it offended every corner of his undead soul to find the microwave beeping at him like a small aggressive demon the moment he returned home. Again. He stood in the doorway of the apartment, one gloved hand still wrapped around a paper bag from the butcher shop, the other frozen mid-reach toward the light switch he never used. The air inside was thick with burnt popcorn, lavender body spray, and the electric undercurrent of poor decisions. "Don't open that," came a voice from the couch. Harper, of course. Lucian sighed. She didn't look up. Curled under a blanket shaped like a giant tortilla, one foot sticking out, she was surrounded by a sprawl of open chip bags, her phone casting blue light across her face like she was being interrogated by Instagram itself. A spoon rested precariously on her laptop keyboard. Again. And somewhere beneath it, a crime documentary murmured ominously about forensic dental records. "You left the microwave running for 10 minutes, he said, setting the bag of pig's blood on the counter with a soft thud. "I was making tapas," Harper replied. He arched a brow. "Tapas? You know, like midnight snacks. But fancy." Her voice was too casual. She'd clearly forgotten the microwave. Again. Lucian walked past her, taking off his coat slowly, deliberately, like the effort might keep him from delivering a lecture he'd given too many times already. "You understand the concept of fire, yes? I recall you nearly burned your eyebrows off the last time you attempted creme brulee." She finally looked up, squinting at him over the edge of her phone. Her hair was half in a bun, half rebelling against it, and she had a smudge of chocolate near her jaw, or perhaps mascara, or both. "Relax, Dracula. I blew it out. Anyway, how was the blood run? Do they still offer punch cards?" Lucian let her have the jab. It was easier that way. "A discount for loyalty. I should hope immortality counts." She snorted softly and returned to her phone. Her thumb paused mid-swipe. "Hey. Question. You ever tried Tinder?" Lucian stopped in his tracks. Harper didn't notice or pretended not to. "Like, seriously, there are some wild profiles out here. One guy just has a photo of his truck and the phrase must love meat." "Is that a euphemism?" he asked carefully. "It's something," she muttered, then tilted her head. "You should totally try it." Lucian turned. "Pardon?" "Tinder. You. Dating. It's 2025. You might as well catch up. Your vibe's totally hot goth librarian. Women would eat that up." "I see," he said dryly. "And what precisely would I say to these women?" "Greetings, madam. Might I offer you a midnight stroll and a glass of my finest typo?" Harper grinned like she'd just taught a cat to use chopsticks. That, exactly that, but with emojis. He moved to the kitchen and retrieved the blood bag. His fangs ached slightly, not from hunger, but from the effort of enduring the modern world without snapping. The microwave beeped again, and he gave it a look that could have curdled holy water. "I'm serious," she said behind him. "You live in the most romantic city in the world, and you haven't been on a single date since I moved in." "Romance is an illusion peddled by corporations to sell diamonds and greeting cards," Lucian replied, pouring the blood into his glass with the delicacy of a sommelier. "You're such a vampire." "I am literally a vampire." "Exactly. Eternal angst is not a personality." He didn't respond. There were moments like this, quiet stretches in the evening, when her voice curled around the edges of his solitude and made it feel almost warm. Harper never pressed, not exactly, but she had a way of circling truth until it slipped out of him like a secret. She set her phone down, pushed the laptop off her lap. "Come on, let me set up a profile. Just for laughs. We'll lie. Say you're a history professor who brews his own wine and lives in a crypt-themed Airbnb." Lucian turned to her. Her eyes were brighter than the screen beside them, dancing with mischief and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or loneliness that mirrored his own. He knew he should say no. That this was dangerous. That exposure was a risk he couldn't afford. But then again, what was eternity if not a very long, slow descent into boredom? "Fine," he said. Harper blinked. "Wait, seriously?" He gave a shallow nod. "On one condition." She raised an eyebrow. "I choose the username." Harper grinned and reached for her phone. "Deal." Within minutes, she had him posing against their bookshelf, buttoned down, slightly unbuttoned, sleeves rolled just enough to show veins that didn't pulse. She typed furiously while he hovered behind her, occasionally suggesting words like erudite or nocturnal gentleman. She rolled her eyes at half of them, deleted others. Eventually, she showed him the profile. Name, Luke. Age, 34 inches. Harper's choice, you read older. Job, archivist. Bio. Lover of wine, ruins, and rare books. No pets. Allergic to sunlight. Always up for midnight coffee. Lucian stared at it. It felt absurd and also not. Harper grinned. "Now we wait." He turned back toward the kitchen, swirling the glass in his hand as he walked. The blood was cool now, just a few degrees below human warmth. Still, it would do. Behind him, Harper's phone dinged. "Oh my God," she said. "You got a match. That was fast." Lucian paused. Harper leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "Her name's Lilith. That's not ominous at all." He took a slow sip from the glass, watching his reflection warp in the window. "Let's see where this takes us," he murmured. Behind him, Harper laughed. The sound didn't echo, but it lingered. Chapter 2. The Goth, the Vegan, and the Ex. The scent of clove cigarettes still clung to Lucian's coat as he stepped out into the night. It wasn't the kind of cold that bit through fabric. No, this was the quieter kind, the kind that pressed up behind your teeth, that made breath feel more like fog than air. It suited him. The cold always had. He pulled the collar of his coat higher and didn't look back at the diner. The date had lasted 11 minutes and 24 seconds. She'd arrived early, dyed black hair and sculpted spikes, eyeliner sharp enough to slit throats. She'd worn a corset over a vintage band tee and called him Count Snacula. Before she'd even sat down, she claimed to be super into vampire culture, which in this case meant she'd read Twilight at 13 and never emotionally recovered. When she'd asked if he wanted to feed on her under the table, Lucian had pretended to receive a very important phone call and excused himself with the practiced ease of a man who once escaped a Vatican dungeon using only a rat and an opium pipe. Now back in the open air, Brooklyn glittering under half-broken streetlights, Lucian walked without purpose. He didn't need to breathe, but he did it anyway. A habit from another lifetime. The taste of artificial perfume still lingered in his sinuses. Harper would ask how it went. She always did. She kept a handwritten, post-date debrief template stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cursed pineapple. 1. Did they eat garlic? 2. Did they think vampires are sexy? 3. Did they survive? It was supposed to be a joke, but he knew, even if she didn't, how close those questions were to something real. His second date happened 2 nights later, with a woman named Elle. She was a vegan nutritionist who insisted on meeting at a raw food cafe filled with potted succulents and aggressively cheerful playlists. Lucian had politely chewed what he suspected was compressed cashew mulch while she spoke at length about intestinal flora. When the waiter brought out a turmeric smoothie and introduced it as gut magic, Lucian realized he might prefer sunlight. By the time they reached her walk-up apartment, Lucian had said fewer than 50 words. He'd tried, truly, to engage. But when she leaned in for a kiss and caught the copper scent of his breath, she pulled back with a frown and asked if he'd been snacking on pennies. He left before she could formulate a theory involving anemia. He didn't go straight home. Instead, he walked aimlessly through the Lower East Side, past bars leaking laughter, corner bodegas lit like aquariums, alleyways filled with humanity's shed layers. He passed a window where a man pressed a woman up against the glass, their breath fogging up the world behind them. He envied them, not for the desire, but for the simplicity of it. He thought about Harper, though he didn't mean to. She'd called dating an experiment. That word rang in his ears now, cold, clinical. He wondered as he turned up the collar of his coat whether that was all this was to her. A distraction, a joke, a science project to pass the time between freelance shifts and half-finished screenplays. He told himself he didn't care, then he told himself it was noble not to. But that night he didn't drink. The blood stayed cold in the fridge. The third date was not his idea. It came in the form of a text. Unfamiliar number, single emoji, a wine glass. Vinny. Lucian knew better. But curiosity had always been his worst sin. That, and longing. He found himself at Nocturne, a speakeasy hidden behind an antique bookstore downtown. Inside, red velvet dripped from the walls, and candlelight flickered over shadowed faces. There were no mirrors. There never were. Vinny sat in the back booth draped in a suit so sharp it looked like a weapon. He hadn't changed. Pale, perfect, and smiling like a fox who'd just spotted a henhouse with the door ajar. "Lucian," he said, voice like melted sin, "you've aged like sacrificial wine." Lucian didn't sit. "Why did you contact me?" Vinny leaned back, folding his hands over a drink that wasn't wine. "Word is you're dating." Lucian didn't answer. Vinny tilted his head. "Come now. Is it true you've been ghosted by a raw food activist? I see gossip still drips faster than blood in our circles." "You're bored," Vinny said, voice softening. "I get it. You always needed more than we could give each other. Drama, romance, mortals. God, Lucian, you never change." "I'm not here to reminisce." Vinny's smile faded. For a moment he looked almost sad. "You could come back, you know. To the fold. To us. To be a relic on display, no thank you." Vinny's eyes flicked past him. "Be careful. Playing human comes with a cost." Lucian left before he could say more. The air outside felt fresher, though he knew it wasn't. Still, he lingered near the curb for a moment, watching taxis crawl past like lazy insects. By the time he returned home, the apartment was mostly dark. Mostly. The living room glowed dimly from Harper's laptop. She was asleep, legs tangled in a blanket, hand resting on the keyboard. On screen, a document sat open, untitled. He meant to walk past. He didn't. He leaned in. Read the first lines. INT. Coffee shop. Night. A man in an immaculate black coat walks in. He does not order. He never does. The barista glances up, wary. She doesn't know his name, only that he always tips in foreign coins and never blinks. Lucian closed the laptop gently. He stood there a long time, the quiet pressing against him like a slow tide. Harper shifted in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't quite catch. He moved to the kitchen, poured himself a drink. This time, he didn't warm it. He drank it cold, eyes fixed on the reflection of her silhouette in the window. He didn't know what he was becoming, but he knew he was not the same creature who had walked into that bookstore. And he knew, with the kind of certainty that stretched back through centuries, that no one he'd matched with could haunt him the way a woman asleep on a couch did. Chapter 3. Harper's Rules of Courtship. Lucian awoke at dusk as he always did, not with a jolt, but with that soft, steady awareness of time passing wrong. The way a violin string, once plucked, still hummed in the silence. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the clink of ice in a glass that wasn't his. Somewhere, Harper was awake. She rose before him more often than not, her circadian rhythm dictated by coffee and chaos, her mornings filled with hurried footsteps and cold toast. He moved through the shadowed hall passing her door, cracked open as usual. She left everything slightly ajar, like she trusted the space itself to know her boundaries. In the living room, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, hair still damp from a shower, draped in a vintage band tee and sweatpants that had seen better centuries. A mug balanced precariously on a stack of books beside her, steam curling upward. Her laptop glowed before her, casting light across the notepad in her lap, which she was scribbling in with the intensity of someone trying to outrun a thought. Lucian lingered in the doorway longer than he meant to. She looked up as if sensing him. "Morning. It's night. For you." He said nothing. Instead, he moved to the kitchen and began the ritual of preparing his drink. The bag of blood had a small tear, and he handled it with delicate fingers, wiping the edge clean with a paper towel before pouring it into the crystal. The scent didn't bother him anymore. Not since Harper started leaving half-sliced lemons in the fridge beside it. She padded in behind him, barefoot, still scribbling. "I've been thinking about your dating game." Lucian tilted the glass in his hand, watching the surface swirl. "That's troubling. I made you a list." She slid the notepad across the counter like a dealer laying down a card. At the top, in large block letters, "How to not be the weirdest man on Tinder." He scanned the items. They were numbered. Some were crossed out and rewritten. "Number 3, she said, tapping it. "No more quoting Byron. You sound like an English professor with a secret dungeon." I thought that was fashionable now. Not unless you own a yacht or have cheekbones sharp enough to cut emotional baggage. He glanced up, brow raised. "Do I not?" Harper snorted, then grabbed her mug and walked back toward the couch. She moved through the apartment like she belonged in every corner of it, arms brushing walls, toes curling on rugs, eyes always cataloging, measuring, thinking. Lucian followed slower. They fell into their usual places. She curled up sideways, head against a throw pillow that once belonged to a priest. He in the armchair across from her, hands resting on the armrests like he expected judgment at any moment. Harper took a sip, watching him over the rim. "You're not bad at dating. You're just dense." "Dense? Emotionally? You don't flirt. You brood. There's a difference. I've been told my silences are compelling." "By who, librarians?" Lucian allowed himself a small smile, the kind that faded before it fully bloomed. It was easy, this sparring. Easier than what lay beneath it. She set her mug down. "You've been on what, 4 dates? And you haven't kissed anyone?" Lucian shifted ever so slightly. "I find the practice intimate." "It's supposed to be." He watched her now, carefully. There was something under her tone, not accusation, not pity, curiosity perhaps, or the soft edge of concern that she never voiced aloud. "I don't think I'm built for casual affection," he said after a pause. "It's not how I learned to engage with people." "Because you learned to engage with them by biting their neck?" "Something like that." She nodded slowly, more serious now. "You ever been in love?" Lucian didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the painting on the wall, a storm-tossed sea, endlessly gray, and wondered if that counted. Harper didn't press, she rarely did. Instead, she reached for the remote and flipped on the TV. The opening credits of something cheerful and garish began to play, all fast dialogue and pastel apartments. Lucian remained in his chair, unmoving, his glass untouched. They sat that way for a while. The soft flicker of screen light danced across their faces. Outside, the city murmured to itself. Tires on wet pavement, sirens in the distance, wind scraping past high windows. At some point, Harper slid sideways on the couch until her feet were stretched across the cushions, toes peeking out from beneath the hem of her sweatpants. Her eyes didn't leave the screen, but her voice was softer now. "You know you don't have to pretend." He looked at her. "Pretend what?" "That this is just for fun. The dating. The experiment." Her shoulders lifted in a shrug that didn't quite land. "You can say you're lonely." Lucian stared at the ice in her mug, half melted now. The glass sweat in her hand. Her thumb circled the rim once, twice. He thought about the people he'd met. The goth, the vegan, the endless string of wrongness dressed in perfume and forced laughter. How none of them asked questions that mattered. How they looked through him, or worse, at him like a novelty. And then there was Harper, asking nothing, saying too much. "I don't think I know what lonely means anymore," he said. She turned the volume down. Not off, just down. Enough that silence filled the space between them again. Lucian rose slowly, taking his glass with him. She didn't watch him go. In the kitchen, he poured the blood into the sink. It spiraled down the drain, dark as ink, vanishing without protest. He stared at the empty glass for a long moment. Then he opened the fridge, took out another packet, and began again, this time warming it, not in the microwave, but gently, by hand, over the stovetop flame. Behind him, Harper started humming, off-key, familiar. He didn't ask the name of the song, he already knew it. Chapter 4. The Suspicious Neighbor. The smell of rain always came before the downpour itself. Thick, metallic, like something rising from beneath the earth rather than falling from above. Lucian paused at the base of the stairs, eyes lifted to the cloud-choked sky, one hand tucked beneath his coat where a folded umbrella lay untouched. The city felt suspended, waiting to exhale. He'd left the butcher late. A delivery error had forced him to linger near the back, making idle comments about marrow quality, while the clerk miscounted blood packets with trembling hands. It wasn't Lucian's fault, really. He merely had that effect on the easily unnerved. Something about posture, perhaps. Or the eyes. The rain broke just as he reached the brownstone steps, soft at first, then more insistent. Brooklyn's rusted gutters began to overflow. Lucian stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a click that echoed too loudly in the hallway. She was waiting for him. Maxine Caldwell. Downstairs unit. Former stenographer. Current collector of neighborhood gossip and unlicensed theories. She stood half-shadowed in her own doorway, robe cinched too tightly at the waist, one foot bare, one still in a slipper shaped like a raccoon. She held a wine glass in one hand and a paperback mystery novel in the other, thumb pressed halfway through the spine as if she'd been interrupted mid-revelation. Her eyes narrowed, sharp behind bifocals. Late-night neighbor. Lucian gave a polite nod. The butcher was inefficient. Maxine didn't smile. You know, I was just thinking about you. I find that unlikely. She took a slow sip from her glass, red liquid staining her upper lip. Lucian resisted the urge to analyze the scent. Cabernet, probably, or something boxed and stronger. You always come and go after dark, she said, gaze too direct. Never see you on trash day, or laundry day, or any day. Lucian took a step upward. She mirrored him. You don't own a mirror, she added. Saw your bathroom window open once. Not a single reflective surface. A personal choice. And Harper. Maxine's voice sharpened slightly. Does she know? Lucian tilted his head. Know what? Max's smile didn't reach her eyes. That you're either a very quiet cult leader or something stranger. Lucian said nothing. She wasn't close enough to be a threat, but close enough to be a problem. Maxine took another sip, then stepped back into her doorway. People disappear in this neighborhood, you know. Always have. History runs deep here. She gestured vaguely with her wine glass. Basements, tunnels, secrets under the streets. Lucian let her retreat without response. As the door clicked shut behind her, he remained on the stairwell for a moment longer, the silence settling over him like ash. Upstairs, the apartment was lit in gold. Harper had strung new fairy lights across the windows, lopsided, buzzing faintly. The air smelled of burned cinnamon and warm electronics. She was at the kitchen counter, arms elbow-deep in flour, phone tucked between her shoulder and cheek, humming a tune that kept slipping out of key. She didn't hear him come in. There was something about watching her unnoticed, not out of predation, but preservation. A ritual. The way her movements carried an unfiltered rhythm. The way she laughed at whatever the person on the other end said, smudging flour on her cheek when she reached to swipe away a strand of hair. She always left things slightly unfinished. A drawer half open, a recipe scrawled on the back of a receipt, a feeling never fully voiced. He moved toward his room, coat damp, footsteps soft. The umbrella had never left his pocket. Later, she knocked on his door. Not hard, just enough to signal her presence. She always waited, even when he didn't answer. "I made cinnamon rolls," she called. "They're burned but edible." He emerged after she was gone, finding the tray on the kitchen counter. The edges were blackened, the centers undercooked. She'd left a single post-it note beside them with a smiley face and the words, "Attempt was made." He ate one cold. The next evening, Maxine's voice crept up through the vents. She was on the phone with someone. Sister, friend, podcast co-host. Lucian couldn't tell. Her tone was conspiratorial, threaded with wine and suspicion. "Never eats, never blinks, and that Harper girl, I'm telling you, she looks paler lately. What if he's like feeding off her energy or some new age crap? People do that now. Leeching. Psychic vampires." Lucian closed the vent quietly. The apartment felt smaller after that, not cramped but tense. Even Harper noticed. She left a note on the fridge. "Did you piss off Max?" She asked if I believed in blood magic. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. That night, Harper emerged from her room in a hoodie that wasn't hers. It was far too old. Navy with fraying cuffs and an emblem from a university that closed in the 1800s. She wore it casually, sleeves pulled over her hands, eyes unfocused as she scrolled her phone. She moved to the couch, curled sideways, and hit play on an old vampire film, the kind that dripped melodrama and fog. Lucian sat across from her, not speaking until the film reached its midpoint, a scene where the vampire, pale and tragic, hovered inches from the heroine's throat, but couldn't bring himself to bite. Harper spoke softly, not looking up. "Do you ever miss it?" Lucian blinked. "The whole biting thing," she added, scrolling. "The blood, the seduction, whatever it was back then." He considered lying. He considered answering with humor. Instead, he said, "Sometimes it wasn't about hunger, just wanting to be close, to leave a mark." She was silent a moment longer, then set her phone face down on her chest. Her eyes stayed on the ceiling. "That's the loneliest thing I've ever heard." He didn't disagree. She fell asleep before the movie ended, breathing shallow, lips slightly parted, one hand curled against her chest. The hoodie slipped off one shoulder, revealing the bare line of her neck, a space both sacred and profane. Lucian turned away. Outside, the rain returned, washing over the street like it was trying to cleanse something far older than dirt. And in the hallway below, behind a door that never fully latched, Maxine kept watching. Chapter 5. Exposure. The letter arrived folded, sealed, and soaked in the faint, bitter musk of old blood. Not the kind meant for drinking, but for warning. The seal bore no symbol, only pressure. Thumbprint deep, exact, too smooth for a human hand. It had been slipped beneath the door without sound. No footsteps, no knock. Just presence, like a shadow where no light had ever stood. Lucian held it between two fingers as though it might bruise. He didn't need to open it to know. The council had seen him, or worse, had chosen to acknowledge it. He left the letter on the windowsill unopened. Outside, the city moved as it always did, unaware and unapologetic. Sirens stitched themselves across the skyline, merging with the cough of buses and the metallic clatter of scaffolding in the wind. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Rain dripped from the eaves like the city was sweating through a fever. In the kitchen, Harper sang softly over the kettle, a voice too human to be in tune, but so achingly alive that it caught in the quiet like light on wet pavement. She never asked about the council, never asked about the way Lucian sometimes stared too long at his reflectionless spoon, or how he tensed when she opened the curtains too wide. She just existed, unfolding into the apartment like the scent of old books and warm cotton. He watched her pour tea into her favorite chipped mug, the one with faded stars and a handle held together with glue and stubbornness. Her hoodie sleeves covered her hands again. She always dressed soft when the world felt sharp. Lucian turned away before she could see him looking. That night he stayed in the hallway long after Harper had gone to sleep, waiting, listening. The knock came at precisely 3:33 a.m., not loud, not rushed, like someone requesting entry into their own home. Lucian opened the door slowly. Mr. Voss was not tall, but he made the hallway shrink. Thin-framed, dressed in a coat that looked too smooth to be made of any animal Lucian recognized. His skin was too pale, like something that had been drained and preserved. Eyes dark, mouth pinched, hands bare. He smelled like salt and steel, and something deeply, anciently clean. He didn't smile. They never did. Lucian stepped aside. Voss entered without thanks. The man made no sound as he walked, his steps gliding more than falling, and when he stopped in the middle of the apartment, it was as though the walls shifted slightly to make room for him. "You've been careless," Voss said. His voice was quiet but not gentle. It had the weight of old decisions, the kind that stayed carved into stone long after the speaker turned to dust. Lucian folded his hands behind his back. "I've broken no law. You've danced near enough to the fire. No blood was spilled." Voss turned slowly, eyes scanning the apartment, pausing on a crooked painting, on the 2 mugs drying in the sink, on the edge of a sweatshirt tossed over the back of a chair. "Your proximity to mortals has drawn attention. Some are amused. Others, less so." Lucian said nothing. Voss took a step forward, examining the room like it was a photograph that needed decoding. "You remember what happened the last time one of us grew sentimental?" Lucian's jaw tensed. He did. "There's still time to correct your posture," Voss continued, glancing toward the hallway Harper slept beyond. "Withdraw. Delete the record of your identity from the network. Reinforce the divide. She's not a threat. They never are. Until they are." Voss walked back toward the door without another word. He didn't touch the knob. It opened for him. Lucian stood in the center of the room long after the man had gone, the scent of rain returning to replace the sterility Voss left behind. He didn't sleep. Instead, he stood by the window, watching the wet glisten of rooftops, the faraway pulse of lights against clouds. Morning crept up slowly, and with it, Harper. She found him near dawn, still dressed, still silent. She didn't ask. Just padded into the kitchen, barefoot, and reached for cereal she'd once described as emotional comfort in crunchy form. Lucian turned toward her, words forming somewhere far behind his tongue. She looked smaller in the half-light, one shoulder bruised purple from sleep. She leaned against the counter with that particular human slouch that spoke of time and gravity, and a body that remembered falling. He almost told her. He almost said the name Voss, almost described the rules, the warnings, the knives tucked beneath centuries of etiquette. He almost said how easily things fracture when the council chooses to notice them. Instead, he said, "I'm deleting the app." She blinked at him, milk halfway to the bowl. "What?" "I'm done with the experiment." Harper looked at him for a long moment, not confused, just still. He could see it then. The shift, the calculation, the hurt stitched in between the cracks of surprise. She didn't ask why. She didn't argue. She simply poured the milk and nodded. All right. It was too easy, too quiet. Lucian watched her walk back to the couch, cereal balanced in one hand, phone in the other. She didn't glance back. That night she didn't hum. She typed quickly, words clacking in the dark. Her script, perhaps. Or something else entirely. He watched her fingers move like she was spelling something she'd never say aloud. Outside, the storm returned, harder this time, and somewhere between the first and second roll of thunder, Lucian realized he hadn't heard her laugh in 2 days. Chapter 6. Ghosted. The rain had stopped, but the sky still sagged with the weight of something unfinished. Clouds loomed low over the rooftops, neither light nor dark, simply suspended. Even the birds seemed unsure whether to sing. Lucian hadn't left the apartment in 2 nights. He told himself it was because of the weather, the council, the thinning line between safety and spectacle. But the truth was smaller than that. Quieter. It sat just beneath his ribcage, uninvited and unmoving. Her name had been Naomi. He met her by accident, not on the app, but in a bookstore Harper dragged him into, a converted laundromat with shelves taller than sense. Naomi had worked there. She recommended a book of modern poetry and said it like a dare. Her smile had been crooked, unpracticed. It made Lucian feel as though he'd walked into something real, something unperformed. She hadn't asked what he did for work. She hadn't complimented his coat. She'd asked what his favorite smell was. He'd said cedar. She'd said old chalk. They'd both laughed, soft and uncertain. 2 dates followed, one in a cafe where neither of them drank coffee, and one in a planetarium where the stars bloomed overhead like secrets being coaxed into bloom. Naomi had sat with her knees pressed to his, reciting constellations without looking up, naming each one like it mattered who they were. Lucian had almost told her, not everything, but enough, and then she vanished. No third message, no reply, no polite retreat or vague excuse. Just silence. He'd stared at the screen long after her read receipt, as if sheer focus could resurrect attention. But Naomi was gone. Harper noticed, of course she did. She noticed everything even when she didn't mention it. She no longer waited for him to sit near her. No more debriefs. No playful teasing about goth girls and typo chemistry. She filled the silence with soundless music, earphones in, laptop open, typing until her fingers ached. When she wasn't writing, she cleaned with surgical precision, drawers, cabinets, the inside of the fridge. Lucian found a bottle of soy sauce from 2013 in the trash. Neither of them had ever bought soy sauce. He checked the app one last time. Naomi's profile still existed. He stared at it longer than he meant to. Then he saw it. A new photo. Recent. From a party. She stood beside a man with cropped blonde hair and a broad smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lucian's gaze lingered on the man's watch. Too ornate. The type they wore. The hunters. It was always the accessories that gave them away. He deleted the app that night, not out of grief or anger, but with the same resignation one used to seal a tomb. The apartment settled into a pattern. He moved through the evenings like a ghost in his own house. Harper adjusted accordingly. They didn't fight. They didn't discuss. They simply passed each other, 2 shadows cast by the same flickering bulb. She cooked less, he drank more. Blood packets emptied faster than they were replaced. One night she left takeout on the counter. Noodles, half warm, with no note. It was a gesture without pressure, like a paper boat left on a flooded street. He didn't touch it, and instead he stepped out. Brooklyn was loud that evening, the noise erratic and sharp. Lucian walked without intention, hands deep in his coat pockets, collar high. The cold kissed at the skin beneath his eyes. He let it. He needed something to remind him there were boundaries still, edges between self and world. He passed a bar with fogged windows. A couple argued outside it, their fight full of laughter, like they didn't mean a word they said. Down the block, a man leaned out of a food truck, arguing with a cat. Humans lived in their grief so quickly. They spilled and stitched themselves in the same breath. Lucian wondered what it would be like to forget things after a single sleep. When he returned, the apartment smelled like burnt sugar and regret. Harper was curled on the couch, a blanket wrapped haphazardly around her shoulders, laptop open, eyes glossy from too much screen time. She was watching a cooking competition with the sound low, the subtitles crawling by like exhausted ants. Lucian paused in the doorway. She looked up, didn't speak. He moved to the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it again. Behind him she spoke, barely above the sound of the humming radiator. She didn't deserve a third date. It wasn't a question. He didn't respond. Harper looked back at the screen. One of the contestants was crying over a collapsed souffle. The audience applauded anyway. Pity, masquerading as support. "She didn't see you," she added, quieter this time. "Not really." Lucian remained standing, fingers resting on the back of a chair. Harper didn't look at him when she said it. She didn't say anything more. The episode ended. Another began. She fell asleep again with her face turned toward the cushions, hand curled beneath her cheek. She muttered something incoherent as she shifted, some dream language that meant nothing and everything. Her foot nudged the edge of a pillow. Her breath fogged the cold spot on the couch beside her. Lucian stood there long after the credits rolled. Outside, snow had begun to fall, not heavy but steadily. Soft flakes gathered on the windowsill like silent witnesses, and Lucian, who had once lived in castles and caverns and crumbling theaters, stood in his tiny kitchen with his hands empty, watching a girl sleep in a hoodie too big for her, and felt something press at the edge of his chest that had nothing to do with blood. Chapter 7. The Almost Kiss. The storm rolled in just after midnight, not with drama, but with weight. A creeping hush, the kind that pressed against the glass and made the light bulbs flicker in protest. Thunder followed slowly, low and dragging like something being hauled across stone. Lucian stood at the window motionless, watching the trees below twitch against the wind. The air smelled like static and wet pavement, tinged with the faint electricity of something about to break. The apartment lights dimmed once, then went black. Silence. Then the sound of Harper cursing softly from her room. A door opened, then footsteps padded across the wooden floor. She emerged into the living room wearing flannel pajama pants, socks mismatched, and a candle already lit in one hand. Her hair was a mess of soft curls and agitation. "Grid's down," she muttered, though there was no one else to hear it. Lucian didn't move. He watched her through the veil of flickering candlelight. She set the flame on the coffee table, and for a moment it cast her face into soft angles. All warm gold and sleep-heavy eyes. Shadows danced behind her like quiet secrets. He still hadn't spoken when she finally noticed him by the window. "Jesus, you scared me," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "You really have to stop doing the still as a statue thing. One day I'm gonna throw something." Lucian didn't smile. Not exactly. Something passed across his mouth, though. Not amusement, but something older. Quieter. She moved closer, rubbing her arms for warmth. "Well, this is romantic," she said, glancing around the dim apartment. Candlelight, storm sounds, mysterious brooding man. All we're missing is a tragic backstory and a string quartet. "You already have the backstory," he said softly. Harper blinked at him, surprised by the sound of his voice. Then she laughed, a soft, breathy sound like steam rising from a cup. They didn't turn on any more candles. The one on the table was enough. It flickered weakly against the windows, casting ripples of orange across the hardwood. The storm outside grew louder, and somewhere in the distance a siren joined it, weaving into the thunder like a second, desperate voice. Harper sat on the couch, knees drawn up, blanket pulled around her shoulders. She didn't say anything, and Lucian didn't join her. He remained by the window, watching the dark pulse of the city. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was something else. A pause filled with breath and shared space, and the kind of tension that didn't come from conflict, but from proximity too long, unacknowledged. After a while she spoke again. Her voice was softer now, stripped of humor. "You ever miss it before everything froze?" He didn't ask what she meant. There were too many answers, too many centuries to unpack. He turned from the window slowly, letting the room come into focus. Her, curled into herself, the blanket slipping slightly down one shoulder, her throat pale in the candlelight. "There were moments," he said, "but not many." She nodded as if she understood. Maybe she did. Harper had always felt things more clearly than she let on. Her emotions lived in her fingertips, in the way she fiddled with rings she never wore, in the way her voice changed when she asked about things she didn't want the answers to. Lightning split across the sky. For a breathless second, the room flashed into starkness, too bright, too sharp. Then the dark returned, thicker than before. Harper shifted on the couch, pulling the blanket higher, and her gaze found him again. "You can sit," she said. Not an offer. A fact. He crossed the room slowly and sat beside her, leaving space between them. The couch dipped under his weight, and for a moment the candle fluttered as if in response. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the storm battered harder. Wind clawed at the windows, and the candlelight trembled. Harper turned her face toward him. "Are you cold?" Lucian shook his head. She reached toward him anyway. Her fingers touched his wrist, just lightly, barely a graze. The contact was brief, but not accidental. He felt it like heat through silk. Then her hand withdrew, settling back in her lap. She didn't look at him again, and instead her eyes closed. Just for a second. Maybe longer. The kind of closing that isn't sleep, but surrender. Her breath was steady, her posture loose. The storm continued, indifferent. Lucian watched her. He had learned long ago to read the space between moments. The seconds where intention lived before action. The pulse of want before touch. She opened her eyes again, and in the flicker of light her gaze met his. It was not dramatic. There were no declarations, no music swelled, no thunder struck, only closeness and quiet. Her face moved slightly forward, just a tilt. Her breath near his. Warm, unflinching. And Lucian, ancient, composed, solitary, leaned in. Just enough. Her hand found the side of his face, not possessive, but steady. Her palm cool from the air. Her fingers trembling just faintly. A pause between them. A breath suspended. Then she laughed. Barely. A crack of sound that broke the silence like a ripple across still water. "You're not about to bite me, are you?" she whispered. Lucian didn't move. Her hand slipped away. The moment faded like candle smoke. She didn't pull back with fear, only with restraint. A thread pulled taut again. "I wouldn't," he said. She nodded. Her mouth twitched with something almost like a smile. She tucked her legs beneath her again, smaller now, curled away, her back against the arm of the couch. Distance returned. The candle guttered once, then caught itself. Neither of them spoke again. Lucian sat beside her in the dark, hands folded, breath held, watching the window, watching the storm, watching the edge of something slip quietly past without being named. The kiss hadn't happened, but something else had. Something worse. He didn't sleep that day. Chapter 8. Truth drips like blood. It began with footsteps in the hall. Too light for the mail carrier, too late for deliveries. Lucian stood in the kitchen, motionless, a knife still resting beside the sliced lemon he'd added to Harper's tea earlier. The apartment was steeped in the scent of citrus and faint iron. From outside the window, a neighbor's wind chime twisted in the breeze, sending off a metallic shiver with every gust. The knock that followed was not aggressive but impatient. It carried rhythm. 3 short, 1 pause, another knock. Familiar, but unwelcome. Maxine. Lucian didn't answer. The knock came again, louder. Then a voice muffled by the door. "She's not safe with you." No humor in it, no faux concern, just steel coated in wine breath. Lucian turned from the counter slowly. The knife was no threat. It never would be. Not to what was coming. She didn't linger. A few seconds later, her footsteps retreated down the stairs, slower than before, but still certain. The door at the bottom clicked shut behind her with finality. No shouting. No confrontation. Just enough to shift the air. Just enough to plant something cold inside the walls. When Harper returned from work, she was humming again. A quiet tune. Unplaceable. More rhythm than melody. She shed her jacket with one arm while balancing a bag of groceries in the other. A damp patch darkened one sleeve from the rain. She kicked off her boots and dropped the bag onto the counter without glancing up. "I think Max is spying on us," she said. Lightly, carelessly. Lucian didn't speak. She cornered me in the lobby and asked if I trusted men who wore gloves indoors. I said no, but that you made great lemon tea. Still nothing. Harper finally looked at him. He was standing too still. There was something about the way his hands rested on the edge of the counter. Too precise, too quiet. Her smile faded. "Okay. What's going on?" Lucian opened his mouth, closed it again. The silence stretched. Then through the apartment door came another voice. Not Maxine, it was male, crisp, neutral. Harper turned just as Mr. Voss stepped into view. He hadn't knocked. The door hadn't even creaked. He stood in the entryway like he'd materialized out of the wall, coat untouched by rain, hands folded neatly at his front. His eyes passed over Harper as if scanning a painting he neither approved of nor disliked. She blinked once, stepping back instinctively. Her fingers tightened around the grocery bag. Hi?" Lucian didn't move. His gaze was locked on Voss, and something unreadable flickered behind it. "I need a word," Voss said, and though he spoke to Lucian, he didn't look away from Harper. Lucian stepped forward, placing himself between them. "No." Voss tilted his head, not surprised, merely adjusting. Harper looked between them, expression shifting. The line of her shoulders rose slightly. "Lucian?" Still he said nothing. Voss offered a small dry nod. "You've chosen, then." He turned, stepped back through the doorway without waiting for reply. When the latch clicked, the apartment felt smaller. Harper didn't speak at first. She looked at the door, then at Lucian, then back again. "What the hell was that?" Lucian drew in a breath. Shallow, deliberate, the kind taken before stepping off a cliff. "Someone from before." "From before what?" Her voice wasn't loud, just steady, a single thread pulling tighter. Lucian closed the distance between them slowly. He didn't reach for her. He never did. But he let the silence breathe a moment longer before finally speaking. "You remember what you said that night the power went out?" She frowned, brow furrowed. "You're going to have to be more specific. You asked if I missed it, the seduction, the blood, the rest of it." Harper's posture shifted, less guarded now, but not relaxed. Lucian nodded once, as if answering a question she hadn't asked. "I didn't say yes." She waited. He looked past her toward the window. The glass was fogged slightly at the corners. "I didn't say yes because I've never stopped." His voice didn't rise. "Not feeding, that I can control. But the rest of it? The distance? The wanting? The restraint? I live inside it." Harper stepped back slowly. Her hand moved toward the counter, touching the edge of it like she needed something solid. "You're serious?" Lucian nodded once. Her breath caught, not audibly, but in the way her shoulders stopped moving. Like her body hadn't decided yet whether to flee or stay. "You drink blood?" she asked too carefully. "Yes." "From people?" "No. Not anymore." Harper's laugh came sharp and fast, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Not anymore, that's comforting." She turned then. Not fast. Not angry. Just turned, slowly, like the room had grown too bright. She walked toward the hallway, her hand trailing along the wall. He didn't follow. At her door she paused, her fingers rested on the knob. She didn't look back. "You were going to let me fall in love with you, weren't you?" Lucian didn't answer. She didn't wait for one. The door shut behind her with a soft finality, not slammed, just closed. Lucian stood alone in the kitchen, the lemon still slowly drying on the counter, the candle from the storm night still melted in a puddle of wax on the shelf behind him. He didn't move. Outside, the wind had stopped. The chimes were silent. And in the stillness that followed, something shifted inside him. Not grief, not regret. Only the echo of something ancient, worn down by time and softened by centuries of silence. breaking quietly under the weight of being known. Chapter 9. Departure. The suitcase appeared in the hallway 3 days later. Lucian noticed it the way one notices something missing before something new. Her shoes were gone from their usual spot. Her coat, green corduroy with a torn pocket, no longer hung on the back of the door. The blanket she'd always dragged from room to room was folded, precisely, and left on the couch like a statement of surrender. She hadn't spoken to him since the night of the confession, not with words, but silence was its own language, and she spoke it fluently. He watched her move through the apartment as if she were already gone, her footsteps lighter, her presence muted. She didn't linger near the windows anymore, didn't hum over the kettle. She left her tea to steep until it cooled, then poured it out without drinking. The rhythm of her had shifted. Lucian didn't ask where she was going. The envelope on the counter answered before he could, a plane ticket tucked half under a coaster, dated 2 days from now. One way, Los Angeles. She didn't hide it, she never did. She left it there like a postcard with no return address. The apartment began to hold its breath. He found himself doing pointless things, sharpening knives they never used, organizing books she had no interest in, washing the same glass 3 times before setting it on the shelf. His body sought routine, but his mind wandered. Always back to her door, to the space she used to occupy on the couch, to the ghost of her laugh in the bathroom mirror fog. The nights felt longer. Once he walked past her open door and found her asleep in the afternoon light, face turned toward the window, one hand curled beneath her jaw. She looked peaceful, or empty. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. He closed the door without a sound. The next evening, she stood in the kitchen with a list in one hand, checking expiration dates in the fridge. Her pen scratched across the notepad in quick, decisive strokes. Her hair was pulled back, and the sleeves of her sweatshirt were rolled up like she was trying to keep the world from touching her skin. Lucian watched from the hallway. When she finished, she turned. Their eyes met. She didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't speak, just nodded once, as if acknowledging an echo. Then she walked past him, quietly, pen still in hand. That night he folded her clothes, and he didn't mean to. She'd left them half-strewn across the laundry chair. Shirts she never wore, socks missing partners, a hoodie with a coffee stain she'd never managed to remove. He folded each piece carefully, smoothing the edges, tucking loose threads. He placed them in her suitcase. He did not zip it. When he passed her room again, he heard her typing, not urgently, just consistently, a soft rhythm of creation, like she was trying to write herself out of the apartment before she had to walk. He didn't interrupt, and the following day she stood at the window for a long time. It was early. The sky still gray, uncertain. She held a cup of tea she wouldn't drink. Her reflection blurred against the glass. Lucian stood behind her far enough not to cast a shadow. Still she spoke. "Tomorrow morning." Her voice wasn't broken, just tired. He said nothing. She turned slightly, not enough to face him, but enough that he saw the side of her mouth twitch, something that might have once become a smile. "I should have guessed sooner," she said. "I mean, the signs were all there. The gloves, the coat, the whole eternal dusk energy." Lucian watched her breath fog the glass. Her hand trembled slightly when she lifted the cup. She lowered it again, untouched. "I wasn't scared," she added. "I'm not sure what that says about me." Still he didn't answer. She turned finally, fully, eyes meeting his. They were rimmed red, not from crying. He hadn't heard a sound from her room, but from the quiet strain of holding something in too long. "Why didn't you try to stop me?" Lucian looked at her for a long time, then softly, "Because I have no right to ask you to stay." That was all. She nodded once, not disappointed, not relieved. Just nodding, as if confirming something she already knew. She stepped past him and returned to her room. He didn't follow. That night the apartment felt cavernous. He turned off the lights early, sat in the dark with his glass untouched. The blood clung to the sides like something spoiled. He set it down and didn't reach for it again. In the morning, she didn't knock on his door. She didn't leave a note. She simply rolled the suitcase into the hallway and closed her door behind her. The wheels scraped faintly against the floorboards. The click of the latch echoed through the apartment like a final syllable. Lucian waited until the front door closed, and then he rose. He crossed the room slowly, touched the doorknob she had last held. The metal was still warm. He returned to the kitchen. The mug was still in the sink, the one with the chipped constellation. He washed it by hand carefully, drying it with the soft cloth she always used for wine glasses. He set it on the shelf beside the others, though it didn't quite belong there. When he turned, the silence was complete. Not hollow, not still, just empty. And yet, something lingered. Something quiet, something unfinished. Chapter 10. Immortal Idiots. Lucian didn't count the days. He measured them by the silence of the apartment, by the way the light stretched longer across the walls in her absence, by how the sounds of the building changed. The dryer thumped with no forgotten sneakers inside. The hallway no longer echoed with humming or one-sided arguments with podcast hosts. The smell of cinnamon was gone. The lavender shampoo faded from the bathroom air. No teacups left behind with lipstick on the rim. She had left him like humans always did. Not with cruelty, but with the slow, deliberate stillness of someone who'd stayed longer than they should have. He moved through the rooms as though walking through a memory someone else had lived. Her coffee mug remained on the shelf, untouched. Her hoodie hung on the back of a chair, still creased at the elbows. He couldn't bring himself to put them away. He didn't need them gone. He needed them to mean something. Mr. Voss had not returned. Perhaps the council had moved on, content to let Lucian rot in his own exile. Perhaps he had fallen beneath their concern, neither dangerous nor loyal, an anomaly, an irrelevance. Maxine, too, had gone quiet. Her blinds stayed drawn. Her door never opened. Lucian no longer heard her voice in the vents. Either she had stopped watching, or she had seen everything she needed to. He let the world go soft around the edges. There was no mourning, no great collapse, only the stillness of something never fully realized slipping into the space where longing used to live. Then on the 7th morning, or perhaps the 10th, he found her note. It wasn't left on the kitchen table or slid under his door. It was tucked inside his copy of Leaves of Grass, in the spine-cracked edition she once borrowed and never returned. A folded sheet of notebook paper, ink smeared in places, the handwriting uneven, like it had been written quickly, or after a long pause. He sat with it for a long time before unfolding it. You were right. You have no right to ask me to stay, but you could have asked me to come back. Below that, a second line, smaller. Almost an afterthought. Return tickets in the front pocket of your coat. He stood slowly, moved to the hallway, reached inside the long black coat he hadn't worn since she left. The ticket was there. Paper. Not digital. One way. Not to anywhere romantic, not Paris or Prague. Just to her. To Los Angeles. He stared at it long enough for the morning light to shift across the floor. Then he moved, not quickly, not with fanfare, and he packed lightly. No blood, no books. Just a coat, a scarf, and the faint ache of something that might be hope if he let it breathe too long. The airport was overwhelming, light, sound, too many voices and too many registers. The crush of humans pressing forward, all of them going somewhere they believed mattered. He kept his head down, he walked unnoticed, he had centuries of practice. The flight was long, he didn't sleep. He watched the land change below him, cities like circuits, rivers like scars. The sun rose midair. He didn't flinch. Los Angeles greeted him with heat and glass and people who smiled too much and meant too little. He stepped onto the curb with his coat still buttoned, foreign against the weather, his eyes scanning faces that did not belong to her. He took a taxi. The address was scribbled on the back of the ticket, in her same rushed handwriting. The driver talked too much. Lucian answered in hums and nods. The apartment was small, bright, too new. Windows too wide, walls too white. Her shoes sat by the door. Her jacket, the green one, torn pocket still unrepaired, hung beside them. He stood outside for longer than was rational, longer than was reasonable, long enough to consider turning back. Then the door opened. She didn't say his name, she didn't look shocked. She was barefoot, hair unbrushed, a pen still tucked behind one ear, a script in her hand, the same constellation mug in the other. She stared at him like she wasn't sure if she was awake. He didn't move. She stepped aside without a word, left the door open. Her silence was not the same one he'd known in Brooklyn. This one didn't carry distance. It carried a question. Lucian stepped inside. The air smelled like oranges and ink. There was a typewriter in the corner, paper threaded through it, half a scene typed and paused. A cat he didn't recognize blinked at him from the windowsill. He turned to her slowly. Harper set the mug down, brushed her hands on her jeans. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. "You still drink blood?" "Yes." "You still brooding?" "Yes." She nodded, walked closer, stopped just in front of him. "And do you still think you don't deserve to ask for anything?" Lucian didn't answer. She reached up, touched the edge of his collar, straightened it slightly. Her hand lingered. "You're an idiot," she said, softer now. A centuries-old, emotionally stunted, immortal idiot. He closed his eyes and then she kissed him. Not dramatically. Not like a movie. Just the kind of kiss that starts like a question and ends like a promise. When she stepped back, she didn't ask him to stay and he didn't need to be asked. The end.